What is up, bookworms? This is Dani Reads, and here is my January wrap-up. So in January, I read 14 books, which is crazy. Never thought that would happen. Like, starting 2017 off pretty strong. So what I've decided to do, if I am going to continue this abundance of reading every month, I am going to start doing bi-weekly wrap-ups, just so I can actually take the time to talk about the books that I've been reading and kind of shell out all of my feelings about them without feeling rushed or feeling like I am filming for an hour, which I know nobody wants to watch. So for this, I am just going to get into them. I'll probably talk about the books a little bit, but nothing too crazy. And yeah, so let's just get started. So the first book that I finished in January but started in December and read the majority of in December was Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden. I really enjoyed this book. I rated it 3.5 out of 5 stars just because it was a little bit long, but I really enjoyed the story and the characters. I think that they were just, it was so interesting to read about another culture and how things happen in other countries that I had no idea about. So it was definitely something that I was educated on, and it was just it was a good story. I just felt like it was, for me personally, it was just a little bit too long. So the second book I finished in January was The Private School Murders by James Patterson. This is about 4 kids who things just happen to them. I can't really divulge a lot because it's the second book in the Confession series. I read the first book in the series last month in December, and I really enjoyed it. I did enjoy the second book better, so I rated it 3 stars. It was pretty good. It was a really fast read, and it definitely keeps you on your toes. So the third book I finished in the month of January was Counting by Sevens by Holly Goldberg Sloan, which I'll put right here because I got rid of the book immediately after finishing it. I did not like that book whatsoever. I rated it a 1.5 on Goodreads, so I think I gave it technically a 2 stars, but it's definitely a 1.5. I thought the book was gonna go one direction and it just completely went another, and so many opportunities were missed that it was so hard to read that book. I listened to it on audiobook, which made it a little bit easier, because if I was reading it physically, I would have DNF'd it for sure. So the book is about a girl who has autism, and at the beginning of the book, she loses both of her parents. And then it's just kind of her going through life and trying to figure things out post losing her parents. Great concept, horrible execution. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm being too brutal on the book. I gave it my fair shot. If you love this book, that's great. I think that's awesome that you can find the good in it. I just personally did not enjoy it whatsoever, and I kind of feel like I wasted my time a little bit at the end of it. The next book that I finished in January was The Reptile Room by Lemony Snicket. I do have this bind up of the first 3 books. I enjoyed it. I rated it 3 stars on Goodreads. It was definitely a children's book. I wish I read this series when I was younger because I feel like I would have appreciated it a lot more. Now reading any kind of children's series now as an adult, as for the first time, I kind of have a hard time separating what audience it was intended for and me reading it. So I thought it was pretty good. I have seen the movie, so I knew what was going to happen. No, I have not watched the Netflix series yet. I might after reading the 3rd and 4th book, because I know that that's what the series goes through. But yeah, so I'm pretty excited to finish off this bind up because it does have the 3rd story in it, and then I just have to find the 4th book somewhere. So the next book that I read was Holding Up the Universe by Jennifer Niven. I rated this a 4 stars out of 5. I totally loved it. I was really nervous going into it because I did read All the Right Places by Jennifer Niven last year and I was thoroughly disappointed with it. I just did not like it very much. A lot of people raved about it and I don't know if it was because of the hype that I kind of, when I read it, I was kind of just like, oh, okay. I think I was kind of like over all the hype around it. But yeah, Holding Up the Universe was great. It's from 2 perspectives. One was a girl who is overweight and then a boy who cannot remember faces. So he could be looking right at his mom and not know that it's his mom. And it's just about how their stories intertwine and it was such a great read. I blew through it super quickly and it was great. 4 out of 5 stars, for sure. The next book that I finished in the month of January was The Titan's Curse by Rick Riordan. This is the 3rd book in the Percy Jackson series. With it being the 3rd book in the series, there really isn't much to talk about. I'm sure most of you have read the Percy Jackson series. I'm a little bit behind. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I did enjoy it. This is probably my favorite book of the series so far. If I had to rate them, it was probably 3, 2, 1, being the order that I've liked them the most in. But yeah, I really did enjoy this book. I love Rick Riordan's writing. I'm excited to finish this series and then start on one of his other series. The next book that I read was The Paris Mysteries by James Patterson, which is the 3rd and final book of the Confessions trilogy, and I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. It was my favorite out of the series. If I had to rate them, it would probably be the last book was my favorite, then the 2nd, and then the 1st. I feel like the 1st was the ending was kind of like a cop-out, and that's how I feel. With me being a huge fan of James Patterson, I just felt like it could have gone such a different and better way that it just kind of fell short for me. But the 3rd book was great. I definitely recommend this series. It's super quick to get through. I believe it is considered a middle grade, maybe YA. Yeah, I just thought it was a really great series, and series overall, I probably would rate it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So the next book I read was We All Looked Up by Tommy Wallach. Did not care for this book very much. I feel like nothing really happened. It's a story about these kids who find out that there's a meteor headed towards Earth and they have a certain amount of time before it could potentially hit or not hit the Earth. So they have like a 50-50 shot of it hitting, and then if it does hit, about 2/3 of the entire world would be killed. So they're doing all these crazy things to just kind of wrap up their lives because this is it kind of thing. I've never really liked those kind of books. Like, I've read books in the past where it was like, oh, these, like, a list of things I need to do before I die, and then the person finds out they're dying, so they start doing all these things. I'm realizing now that those books are not meant for me because I feel like they are super unrealistic, or the ending usually doesn't pan out the way you think it will. So yeah, I rated it 2 stars. Not my favorite. If you like it, that's great. It wasn't my cup of tea. The next book that I read in the month of January was Orange is the New Black by Piper Kerman. I enjoyed this book. I rated it a 3 stars. I guess I had such a high expectation because I'm obsessed with the Netflix series that this was nothing like the series, which I understand, like, you're trying to get views, so you're gonna make the series way more dramatic. It just seemed like she had a really easy time in prison for the months that she was there, which is great. I mean, and better than getting beaten up every day, I guess. But yeah, it was just a super tame read. It was literally just her life in prison every day. Nothing exciting happened. It was interesting to get that perspective from the actual person who lived it and like what they actually went through, but it wasn't anything thrilling. Like, I almost put this down a couple different times just because I was like, oh, I could be reading other things. because it was just very mundane. But still 3 out of 5 stars. If you watch the series and you're interested to see what the real Piper went through, this is an interesting book to read. Next book that I read in January was The Infinite Seat by Rick Yancey. Rated it 3 stars out of 5. I enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed the 5th wave a little bit more. I just feel like this continuing it on, like it was obviously just a continuation after like just trying to figure out like what to do and all that stuff. So can't really say much about it because it is the 2nd book. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I did rate it 3 stars, but yeah, I'm sorry. I'm like horrible at these wrap-ups. I'm so out of touch. I'll be better, I promise, next time. So yeah, 3 out of 5 stars for this guy. So then I did wrap up the 5th Wave series and read The Last Star by Rick Yancey. Rated it 3 stars out of 5 as well. Thought it was just like The Infinite Seat, just pretty mediocre. It was interesting to see like where the characters went after everything happened, and you know, the continuation of the story. It was interesting to see like where they were and like where their headspace was at. I mean, it wasn't my favorite series. Definitely a series I would recommend to somebody if they like dystopian, but it just wasn't, it definitely didn't make my top 5. The next book that I read was Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver. Lauren Oliver is one of my favorite authors. This was her debut novel, and no offense, but you could tell. I rated this book 3 out of 5 stars. I did enjoy it. I feel like the beginning was a little bit slow, but I really did like where the ending ended up. This is about a girl who, not a nice girl, definitely a mean girl in school, and one night her and her friends get in a car accident and she dies. And the story is of her reliving that same day over and over and over again. And by the end, she's just trying to fix things. And it was a really good story. I did really like the character. I liked her development throughout the book. So that is why I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in the month of January was The Battle of the Labyrinth by Rick Riordan, which is the 4th book in the Percy Jackson series. I rated this book 3 out of 5 stars. Again, just like the Titan's Curse, it was good. It was really good. I just feel like I would have had a different perspective of this if I read it when I was younger. It's just a little bit simplistic, and I always feel like in his books, like it's so slow up to like where all the action is supposed to happen, and then the action happens so fast, and then they're back at camp and you know the new year is about to start. So that would be like my only critique about this book. I did enjoy it. I cannot wait to read these to my kids one day. It's really a great series, and I'm excited to finish it off in the month of February. The last book that I read in the month of January was The Chocolate War by Robert Cormier. I thought I owned this book, and I looked everywhere on my shelves for it, and I cannot find it. So I'm just gonna put a picture here of that. So this book I rated 2.5 stars. Definitely not anything special. I didn't think, it definitely reminded me of the movie A Christmas Story, just because it was kind of based in the same era. It's about this boy who refuses to sell chocolates at school, and it becomes a huge thing, and you know, the school gets involved, even though the school has always told the kids, you don't have to sell the chocolates if you don't want to. And so the kid was like, you know what, I don't want to. And it kind of just proceeds from there. It was an interesting read, but something that I would never pick up and reread, so that is why I did give it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Alright guys, that is it for my January wrap up. I am so happy to be back with you guys, and I cannot wait to see you in my next video. Keep smiling, keep reading. Bye guys.